Hello, everyone, and welcome to the At Matters podcast presented by the Outer Loop Theater Experience, where we create art that matters. My name is Rachel Yoder. I am the artistic director of the Outer Loop, and here on At Matters, we just like to create a space to explore the question, what are we here to do through the lens of art for social change? Here with me today, I have a very exciting guest. I have Sarah Slight, who is the artistic director of Raven Theater here in Chicago. Thrilled to have Sarah on. Yay! And
Thank you for having me.
of course, we're really excited to jump into this conversation and to hear a little bit more about Sarah's life story and purpose and all the really exciting things that she's doing leading Raven Theater. But first, we have to start with our favorite game, which is 5 things. So we've got you up to speed. Do you want to throw me a category first, or shall I throw you a category first?
You give me one first.
Great. Okay. Sarah, I would like to know 5 challenges that you face as an arts leader.
5 challenges I face as an arts leader. Okay, number 1, funding.
Yeah.
Funding for the arts. Number 1 challenge. Number 2, this one's personal, just navigating work-life balance. There, at our size, there's so many things that I could do. I could work all day, every day, and not get it all done. So, work-life balance, number 2. Um, Understanding totally changing audience trends coming out of the pandemic. Everybody's life changed. How you decide to spend your time radically changed. So trying to understand that and cater to that is challenging. Number 4 is maybe directly connected to funding, but capitalism really challenging when you're do work that is emotional and you sort of not judged on a capitalist scale, right? Typically. And number 5 challenge for me as an arts leader. Oh gosh, what is it? Decision fatigue. I'm gonna say decision fatigue. Yeah. And
Being
maybe
the
not necessarily.
decider.
Yes, constant decider at home and at work.
Do you do the Obama thing of just like wear the same outfit every day because there's too many other decisions to make?
I should. I really should. And in the winter, I think maybe you'll see that my outfit is jeans, plain sweatshirt, jewelry. That's the look.
The uniform. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good. That was an excellent 5 things. All right. Throw it to me.
Okay. Well, I understand that this episode is being released on Halloween. So my 5 things for you, Rachel, are top 5 Halloween costumes of your life.
Of my life?
Yes.
That's a good one. Okay. I would say number 1 was the time that all of my friends and I decided we were going to be different like sports balls and make our own costumes. So like there was like I think I was the basketball. So there's like me as a basketball that like a self-constructed costume that's like pretty rough and hilarious. That's probably number 1. Number 2, I was a red crayon as a child, and I was pretty fond of that costume. I think I was a pretty good red crayon. I was both an angel and a devil as a kid. And then I think my favorite one, I was really obsessed with dogs. And these are all from childhood. I haven't done the Halloween thing in a long time. But I was a Dalmatian. Well, than that, like I think I was a Dalmatian maybe like 5 years in a row because I was like really into that Dalmatian costume. So those are my Halloween costumes. Amazing.
Adorable.
Well, at another time we'll get Michael's like unhinged take on how much he despises Halloween. It's just, I know, it's very controversial. But that's for another episode. Yay. Okay, that is our 5 things. And transitioning into our episode for today, we want to chat with Sarah about her life, her purpose, and how she got to where she is and her leadership of Raven. So Let's just jump into the conversation. First, we just like to start off by providing some context for our listeners. So, how do we know each other? How did we come to be in each other's orbit?
Well, when I started at Raven Theater, the Outer Loop was a frequent renter of our space, and we just got to know each other through that relationship. And, talking to you and talking to Michael about the work that you do is really inspiring to me. And I just wanted to find a way for us to work together more closely than just a sort of landlord kind of relationship in the theater. And when I found out that you all have a monthly artist salon series called Talk Hard, I wanted in because we had been talking about doing something very similar at Raven. And it just made sense that if there was an existing framework that we try to partner together on that. So we've been doing that. We've done it twice now, and I'm just thrilled at how that is growing here in Chicago and how much time I get to spend with you all.
We're thrilled too, and we were so excited that you were so open to partnering on that and wanting to jump into that. And I think it's just been very exciting for us as well to do talk art in the Chicago community because the Chicago community is so open to that structure and that kind of environment. So that's been a joy for us too. So you wear a lot of, as many creatives do, you wear a lot of artistic hats. When you sort of think of the question of, how do you define yourself as an artist? What comes up, or how do you typically answer that question?
I typically say that I'm a artistic producer type person. For a long time, I didn't know I was an artistic producer type person, but the skills translate so easily from dramaturgy to that job that it just makes complete sense. So, yes, dramaturg, artistic leader.
Dramaturg and artistic leader. Excellent. And then where
Yeah.
did you before you're relatively new at Raven, leading Raven. Where were you before that? What kind of led you to your current position?
Yeah, so I've been in Chicago for, oh gosh, 14 years at this point. And when I came, I was a freelance dramaturg, made connections with a few different theater companies in that way, and spent 5 years at American Company. And that's really where I grew from a dramaturg, literary manager type person into this artistic producing kind of role. I did a lot at that theater company unfortunately closed in 2018. I took a little break, did a little parenting, and went to Northlight Theater soon after that, where I was the artistic programs manager. I am one of those parents that in the pandemic had to leave their full-time job because of what was required at home to
Mm.
navigate the pandemic with three small children and their schooling and just all of the things that came with being on lockdown. Um, and so once theaters sort of returned after the pandemic, I was freelancing as a dramaturg again, got connected to Raven in that way. And when their artistic director, Cody Essel, decided to take another position in late 2022, interim artistic director at Raven Theater, while they did a national search for the artistic director role. When I came on, I like to describe this as even though it was really difficult to sort of jump back into producing after having taken a few years off, it was also sort of like a light switch turned on, and I remembered a little bit about what my purpose was and why I liked to do this and what was really important to me about being a theater maker and um, being a producer and somebody who has an impact on the kind of art that we see and make in this city. And so I decided to throw my hat in the ring for the full-time gig. And after, a pretty lengthy search process, was ultimately offered the job. And here we are. It's been a year, 1 year in the full-time position. And despite the five things challenge, we're doing what we can.
That's so interesting to hear, and I love how you just described that. I think that oftentimes producing is not recognized as the creative art that it is, and it just doesn't get talked about a lot as an avenue of artistry. Can you talk a little bit more about that and um how you see that as like a creative expression?
Absolutely. I mean, when I think about the work that I've done as a dramaturg, and I've primarily been a new play dramaturg, I view those skills as the person who is supporting the vision of the play, right? Like whether that's working with a living playwright who has said, this is the play that I want to write. And then my role as the dramaturg is to say like, well, here's where I see you're achieving that. And here's where I think perhaps we could spend a little time and attention. Or working with a director on a play by, an existing or established canon play. I think it's the same thing, right? The producer in me is also supporting the vision of the work. I view my role less as like, well, I've decided we're going to do this play, and so, I'm going to just hire people and they'll go do the play, right? I view my job as an artistic director to ask all of the artists around me in my community, what's coming to you? What play do did you absolutely have to write? Or if I'm talking to directors, is there a play, the canon, that speaks to you about this current moment? What is it? Why? How can I support your vision for the story that I tell? And I think because I've spent many years, decades really, training in work, it's really easy for me I feel really comfortable in that support position. It's not my vision for this production, it's your vision. And all of the things that I do to support that, whether it's having an artistic conversation about specific moments in the play or hiring a lighting designer, all of those things point toward that creative vision.
When you have, all of these different creative energies kind of coming at you and saying, "Hey, here's my vision for this thing, here's my vision for this." And how do you in a leadership position sort of unify that into a whole and into a cohesive, okay, this is kind of how I see, a cohesive season, or how do you kind of put all of those energies together?
Yeah, I it's interesting. A lot of people, I think about seasons from a thematic perspective. And I don't often set out trying to make a season based around sort of one theme or one vibe. But sometimes it turns out that way anyway. Like um, this season at Raven, we're doing Ironbound, which is a Chicago premiere. We're doing A Lie of the Mind, a Sam Shepard play, and we're doing a world premiere called Gorgeous. Those plays came to me through really different avenues. The ideas behind those plays are seemingly different, but when I take a step back and have made decisions with my team about, okay, these are the plays we're going to offer for our subscribers this year, um, I realized that there are some threads and through lines. So I don't know, it's a little unintentional, right? All three of those plays are connected to the idea of immigration, some more directly than others, right? Like Ironbound is about immigration. It is about a woman who is an immigrant and her experience of trying to achieve her version of the American dream and whether or not that's possible. A Lie of the Mind um, is not actually about immigration when you read the play, but the director, Azar Kazemi, felt like she saw, as a first generation American, she saw that experience in the play. And so the way that we're casting it is going to add that layer to the story. Sam Shepard's plays are all about people who are sort of on the outskirts of American society and are generally a deep critique of the American family and how they exist within our society. So by adjusting the casting to be a, immigrant or first generation Iranian American family, that's going to really deepen the critique at the heart of the play. And then Gorgeous is a comedy about a bulldog, but but one of the characters in the play is a first generation American, and that's a part of her character and a part of the narrative for that story, although the play is really not directly about immigration at all. And so I did not set out to, make a season about immigration. But again, these projects all came to me, and there's so much to consider, right? Like the artist that you want to work with, the stories you want to tell, the placement in the season, even just the titles and what it all sort of looks like together. That once you take a step back from all of those considerations, I do often find that sometimes there is this through line over the course of these plays. And I was excited to learn that immigration was at the heart of what we're going to be talking about this season at Raven. I don't know if I fully answered your question about navigating all of the different energies coming at me, but yeah, I think that's what I've got.
No, you totally did,
Yeah.
and it sounds like
Okay.
actually from listening to you describe the process that um a lot of it is intuitive and that you're sort of guided by your internal decision making process, and then you step back and you realize that you're the unifier, you're the unifying force behind all of the energies coming at you. It comes through you, and then there's cohesion there because you've been the constant. That's really interesting to process. And of course, hence the decision fatigue, because that's a lot of, small decisions that have to get made and larger decisions that have to get made in the process of putting that all together.
Hmm. Yeah, and we also try to balance, considering what we think our audience would like, the kinds, the styles of plays, the tones, and I think as a dramaturg, I can't help but consider context, right? Which context for season planning is at Raven, 42 years of history to sort of also just leave simmering on the back burner as another ingredient in the season planning process.
How do um, take in, your audience and try to consider your audience and get to know your audience and figure out, like, navigate that? I think that's like a very hot topic in the American theater right now, because I think a lot of theaters are struggling with that, is, how do we program something that's exciting for the artists and also kind of give the people what they want and navigate all of that? How do you tackle that?
Again, I think it's about understanding, especially as a new leader at Raven Theater, understanding the context that existed before I arrived, right? Like knowing the shows that have been programmed previously and understanding, at least based on the metrics we have, right, which are ticket sales and reviews and audience response surveys, right, based on those things, what people responded to. Um, at a theater of our size, I think it's also really reasonable. And our managing director, Adriana Deja Durant, who's also new, and I have been literally just trying to meet people, just literally being in the lobby and saying hello. At our size is a reasonable way to get to know your audience. And yes, there's a lot of talk, um, nationwide, industry wide, about the subscription model and whether that works or not, and how to possibly radically change that. Um, and what we've been seeing is that even though subscription numbers have been going down, we've had a lot of folks who used to come pre-pandemic who are just now starting to return. And we've
Mm.
also had a huge number of brand new patrons to Raven. Last year, we saw, um, our capacity for one run of a show um, is around 1,500 to 2,000 people, depending on how many performances we had. Um, Last year we saw 1,200 new people come to Raven Theater. That's almost an entire audience for one production, and it's really interesting to think about who are those people? How did they find us? Um, so I think it's several strategies for trying to get to know those folks, the new folks, the people who've been coming forever, the people who weren't comfortable coming in the pandemic who are now starting to come back. And for me, it's literally being at the theater and trying to say hi or sending emails or sending notes and literally trying to get to know the actual humans who come, as well as try to understand the information we have available to us about audience trends and how people are making decisions about spending their time. Um, and when they choose the theater, I feel so grateful. When they choose the theater, especially our theater, um, over Netflix or any of the millions of, arts and culture and sports things that one could do in this great city of Chicago, I feel deeply honored and want to respect and get to know those folks better.
Hmm. That's very encouraging. I think for other, artists on the call to hear that, those certain trends. I think it's a lot of, if you look into the industry right now, I think you see a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of people really struggling with the challenges, but it's hopeful to hear that there's new audience, there's excitement, there's return to theater happening after the pandemic. And that investing in our community, the communities that we serve, by really just doing that practice of getting to know people really does matter and pay off. I want to just chat with you a little bit. I'm always interested in hearing, and I think our listeners are always interested in hearing too, kind of how did you find your way to this creative life? What sort of brought you to the theater and theater making in general, and how did you come to that? How did you get passionate about that?
Yeah, um, I think like a lot of people, my first entree was through acting, and thinking that perhaps I would want to be an actor. Um, in high school and college. But in college, I discovered dramaturgy. I had never heard the word before, but I had a wonderful professor, Ann Brewer, at the University of Evansville, just giving her a little love because she was sort of transformational in my life in understanding that there was a job in the theater um, where you get to work with new plays, you get to work with history, you get to work with all of the artists involved. And I think for me, I'm just a theater lover. I'm just interested in plays and how they're made and interested in artists and think artists are so talented and if given the opportunity and the means, like uplift their work. And so when I think back about that and think about the things that I felt passionate about as a younger person trying to find my way in theater, it makes complete sense to me that this is the career path that I am on. But at the time, I thought, I will go to graduate school. I'll be a literary manager somewhere, at a major arts institution, a major regional theater, and I'll be there forever, and while I sort of followed that path, I did go to graduate school. I freelanced as a dramaturg in many different cities and held literary manager positions at larger places. Um, Finding this, small, mid-sized theater company in Chicago, I think this is the sort of the world that I'm most comfortable in right now, at least. Um, it feels like we have the opportunity to take risks without, sort of catastrophic repercussions for the financial side of our organization. And I have the opportunity to really support the artists that I think are exciting and dynamic here in Chicago. Um, so yeah, I can see how that initial sort of impulse and passion to be a dramaturg led me to where I am today on a sort of fun and exciting path that took me to New York and Atlanta and Minneapolis and ultimately Chicago, where we're home, I think.
Yeah, how was that? I because of our own stories of coming from New York and then finding ourselves in Chicago, I'm always interested in hearing what drove that for other people. And you've said you've been here for 14 years, which is quite a long time. And if this is home, what was that journey like? How do you see sort of the different environments between everywhere you've worked, really, but New York and Chicago, and kind of what makes you feel like this is home?
Yeah, really lucky in that I got to go to graduate school in New York, and I felt like, at least for me, I really benefited from having the structure of school inside that, huge, amazing theater town. I saw a lot of folks who I went to school with moving there and really just struggling because it's so hard to make a living and do the thing that you're passionate about and want to do. So for me, having graduate school, I also, because of the school I went to, was afforded a lot of opportunities to see plays, to be connected to commercial theater and nonprofit theater. Um, and I loved it. In the 3 years that I spent there going to school and living, I thought I would never leave. I just thought it was the best place in the world. And I loved my life there and wouldn't trade it for anything. But then when I graduated grad school in 2009 and didn't instantly get a job, right, because we were in a recession and, um, I I started saying yes to things that were kind of anywhere, and that sort of opened my eyes to the way, that theater being made in other places um, had tremendous value. And a really smart mentor and advisor to me in graduate school, Christian Parker, said, you should. He said, if I were to give you advice, I would say pick where you want to live. Like decide on your living conditions, decide where you
Mm,
want to be and where you could see yourself settling down, and you can make theater there.
mm.
Theater is everywhere, and you can do that. And I didn't take his advice at first. I was sort of like, yeah, yeah, okay, I think I need to go wherever someone's giving me a job. Um, and and so I did. I sort of bopped around. Um, Came to Chicago in 2010. It was to work on a show at Steppenwolf in their first look series, which doesn't exist anymore, but was a sort of new play development opportunity for writers that resulted in a fully realized workshop production of whatever script it was. It was a fun, really fun program. Um, and there was just something about Chicago that made me want to stay. And I don't know, I loved that experience at Steppenwolf. I loved the people that I connected with when I was here. And my personal life was such that I didn't have any attachments that were requiring me to be anywhere else. Um, and I decided to just stay. I just didn't leave after doing that show. Um, and, I think we've joked about this before since we've talked about what it's like to move from New York to Chicago and maybe being a little salty at first about like some of the New York City things that don't exist here. Bagels. And
Pizza.
and I I don't know, it just that stuff doesn't matter, right? Like I found real artistic community here, and personal community and, have a family now here. And I just, those three things to me mean home. And
Mm.
I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have chatted about this before, and I agree. I think that Chicago is a really special artistic community, and it's been a gift for us to take part in that. And I was sort of unaware. I think you do in New York sort of have blinders on of like this is it, this is the artistic community, and that's actually not the case. Your mentor was right in saying that actually there's a lot of really exciting theater happening everywhere, and this is definitely one of those places. Um, want to chat a little bit about, so you said, when you first kind of came to Chicago, um, your personal life was such that you were able to kind of be wherever, do whatever. And then you talked a little bit about before becoming a mother. And I know you have three wonderful children. How does that, I know that's something for especially a lot of women creatives that's can be a really hard thing to navigate. So how does that show up for you in your creative life? How do you navigate those competing um, challenges of managing both of those like tremendously energy consuming aspects of your life.
It's really hard, I'm not gonna lie about it being it's hard. It's challenging, but I think for me, when we first started growing our family, I was just stubborn. I was just unwilling to to give up on either thing, right? I was sort of like, I
Mm,
have this baby. I think I know what kind of parent I want to be, and one of those things is like present and
mm,
available, and I also refuse to give up this other part of me that is so fulfilling and necessary. Like I I am a better parent when I am working,
mm,
even if I feel that struggle of like, gosh, this job requires a lot of evenings, a lot of weekends. I'm seeing a lot of shows, right? Necessarily. Or I'm at my own theater when we're in tech and previews and having events around the shows, meeting the audience, right? Like I'm at my theater. Um, and so even in those moments, right, I know that I am a better parent because I am fulfilled in something that actually is not about my family, right? Like it's not meeting any of their needs. It's meeting my needs. And so that um it's emotional and it's hard, but I and I had another smart mentor. I think the theme of this is like have smart people in your life and like try to listen to them. Um,
mm,
Bonnie Metzger, when I just had my first child, right, was like, balance is not possible, at least not in the way that you're thinking about it.
mm,
Day to day, it's not possible. Week to week, maybe, but if you think about balance from a larger perspective, when you think about a month or a few months or even a whole year, um, if I'm able to zoom out and think about that, I see, the ways that I show up as a parent and the ways that I show up in my artistic work do achieve balance in that way. I just can't get bogged down in like, but this week I haven't been here for bedtime at all, like I know that that's true some weeks. That's just part of it, right?
mm,
And um but there will be many weeks where then I will protect those boundaries and say like, no, bedtime's really important. I'm going to be home for the next few weeks
mm.
at bedtime. Um so yeah, it's it's amazing and it's hard and I like wouldn't trade the chaos at all.
That's another really like really beautiful way of contextualizing it, and also I think a hopeful message for I know we had Carolyn Eisenhower on the podcast as well, and she's about to become a mother for the first time, and so she's kind of struggling with, how do I balance those things? And so I think a lot of people sort of silently struggle with that. So thank you for giving voice to your experience with navigating both of those things.
I think also, if I can add a little bit more, there's a great organization called PAL that supports parents in the arts. And, they work nationwide, but I know they have folks based here and in New York who will help with babysitting so that parents can go and audition. More and more theaters are talking about having at least one childcare night so that parents can come see shows. I think it's slow, but I think our industry is talking more and more about how to support working parents in the arts. I've certainly had gigs where um, we had a guest director come to my school, and the school arranged for babysitters so that the guest director could work and bring her baby. And I was one of the people who's like walking up and down the aisles with an infant so that this mom can direct the play.
Mm,
And I just think Tara Mallon at Rivendell is also someone who's really kind of leading that charge here in hiring a lot of working women, it's particular, or parents, working women parents, particularly, um, and figuring out the childcare aspect of it. We haven't been able to offer any of that at Raven yet, but it's certainly something that's like on my mind, on the agenda of as a artist parent myself, like how can I make Raven a space for that in Chicago?
thank you for shouting out those resources. I think that's
Yeah.
very helpful. Um, as we That's a good place to transition into what we like to talk about on this podcast, which is just that question of purpose. So, given all of the aspects that you've discussed and all of the many different roles that you play, when you sit down with the question, as an individual, um, what do you feel your purpose is? What do you feel you're here to do? How does that how does that get articulated for you?
Yeah, I mean, this is a hard one, right? Like I am somebody who is very focused on, okay, here's what we are doing. Here are the things we are already doing, the things the theater is doing, the things I am doing. And so I am going to do those things. Like I'm very sort of organized in that way. And it's hard to find time sometimes to zoom out and go, but why? you
Mm,
know, for me, the mission statement of an organization that I'm working for is really important because it is the purpose, right? Like if the mission statement of Raven Theater is to connect people to culture, I use that in my decision making, the many decisions, to sort of say like, well, is this thing serving that mission? Is this thing serving that purpose? If it is, great. What else do we need to consider in order to do it or make it happen? And if it's not, it's probably not for us. So for
mm,
me, mission is really important for defining the purpose of the organization. For myself, it gets a little bit harder. It's a little like vulnerable and a little bit difficult for me to sort of say like, well, this is my mission. This is my purpose as an artist or a parent or both.
mm,
Um, and and so yeah, I have thought often of myself. I think I've talked a little bit in our time together about being in service of other artists and supporting their vision. And so I think that's probably the closest thing to a personal purpose that I can articulate right now. Um, because I do believe that in supporting the vision of artists to make the plays that feel important to them, I will feel like I've done my job. I will feel like that I've been able um, to serve my artist community and my greater community in that way. I do think of theater as a space that has a responsibility to comment on life and society, which could be through a really broad lens or could be through a very specific lens. Um, and so as someone who is now tasked with making decisions about the vision and future of a theater company, that is also sort of at the core of how I think about my purpose in that role.
mm. And for anyone listening who, particularly those of you who live in the Chicago area, I can attest to the fact that Sarah is living out her purpose beautifully. All of the work at Raven right now, it's very exciting. At the time of this episode's release, I think you'll have a couple more days left to catch Ironbound, so definitely make sure to do that. The artistry that's happening really on all levels that Sarah's been able to support is a really really beautiful masterpiece that's come together so well, and it's an important story. So definitely, if you are listening to this and you haven't seen it yet, then drive yourself up to Raven Theater and get there because it's worth it. So,
Thank
in
you.
our last kind of moments together, I also want to shout out the collaboration between Raven and The Outer Loop, which is Talk Hard, which is our new work salon where artists of all kinds can just share something that's in process in front of a very supportive audience. We are now in our regular cycle, so we produce a new one the first Monday of every month. Our next one will be November 4th, so come check that out and follow us on socials in order to figure out how you can reserve your spot. We've got all that information up on there. Also, just we like to leave everyone with a call to action for the week. Sarah, do you have a call to action for our listeners?
I mean, we're just a few weeks away from this election, y'all. So please vote. Please go out and vote. Um, and and look up PAL. Please look up PAL and think about how you might be able to contribute to supporting parents, remaining working artists along their parenting journey.
Great call to action. Please also remember to follow Raven on socials. I think you have an upcoming project at Northlight as well. Is that correct?
Yes, so in addition to my work at Raven, I still, from time to time, work as a freelance dramaturg, and one of my dear loves and frequent collaborators is Georgette Verdon, and she is directing the world premiere of Lauren Gunderson's Little Women coming up at Northlight. I grew up just loving Little Women. And I adore Lauren Gunderson. I've had the opportunity to work with her a couple of times. And so her sort of feminist lens on the Little Women story is, I think, not to be missed up at Northlight this holiday season.
Agreed. And Georgette is a fiercely talented artist as well. So you don't want to miss anything that Georgette directs.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on and for chatting with us about your story and your path. It's been really wonderful. I've enjoyed the conversation very much, and I think that you are definitely one of those smart people in one's life that you want to keep around to get those nuggets of wisdom from. So thank you for sharing that with our audience today. We really appreciate that. If anything
Thank,
comes up for our listeners, we invite you to email us at podcast@outerlooptheater.org. And I cut Sarah off while she was saying something. So I'll let you share
I
it.
would just wanted to say thank you for having me. This has been a real treat. I appreciate the prompts to get my sort of thinking about my purpose right in this moment is really useful. So I appreciate that opportunity.
Thank you so much, everyone, and we will see you next Thursday. Bye.